Living Corporate is brought to you by Doximity. Doximity helps over 2 million medical professionals. We are the largest medical network that includes over 80% of physicians and over 50% of physician assistants and nurse practitioners. We don't take that responsibility lightly and committed to working towards a more equitable world inside and beyond our virtual office walls. If you want to learn more about Doximity, check out your app store at DOXIMITY. That's DOXIMITY. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and listen, I struggle. I've historically struggled with the concept of patriarchy. Like, I've been getting into it and like really seeking to understand it as like conceptually, and then also my place and role in it as a black man for the past few years. Really, I think Living Corporate has opened my eyes to understand like just the dynamics and like the intersectionality of race and gender as it pertains to like power dynamics and just like culture. And so it's hard for me historically to like grasp or accept the idea that white women don't have all the privileges I have, or that I have any advantages over a white woman. But the reality of patriarchy is that while I certainly don't have the same benefits as a white man or a more white adjacent man has, I certainly as a man participate in the patriarchy and benefit from it in ways that white women simply do not. At the same time, one could argue that white women benefit and certainly engage in the patriarchy in ways that I do not. But the point is that I think the conversation around like patriarchy, like, and just for those who don't know, patriarchy ultimately just the concept that men are in charge and are by default and design the authority in this country and culture, in every aspect of culture, that men are the default and that women are seen as the weaker, and frankly, women are seen as lesser to be dominated, right? Like, there's a bunch we could like go into, you know, like various definitions of the patriarchy. But the point is that, you know, I very much so appreciate conversations that really seek to engage that and really, again, like engage how black men it play a role in it, especially as it pertains to how we create harm, disinclusion, and outright malice for black women, especially black trans women, but black women across the board. And I say all this, I give all this intro to say I'm really thankful for Frederick Joseph. Frederick and I, we connected some years ago at a Twitter event, shout out Goddess. And I just really appreciate like all of his work, his voice, and the work that he's doing in the book that he wrote, Patriarchy Blues. And then we talk about it in our interview here that you're going to hear in a moment. But I really want to shout out Fred because there are very few people in this space, right? In this like media / influencer / thought leader space that you get authentic vibes from. Like, most folks are here for, you know, to get put on, they're here for a look, they're here for a check. And Fred is just a nice guy, man. He's just an authentic, nice guy, right? And like, there's not a lot of people like that, you know, like in my experience, sadly to say, like, it's true. Like, there's just not a lot of people like that. So I want to shout out Fred. I'm really excited about the conversation y'all going to hear in a minute. Before we do that though, got to pay some bills. So we'll be right back. This episode of Living Corporate is brought to you by Blind. Blind is a trusted community of more than 5 million verified professionals. On Blind, professionals connect and have honest discussions about salaries and what it's really like to work at or interview with a company. You can also join your private company channel to have a candid and safe conversation with your coworkers about what's really going on. And because it's anonymous, you can be honest and trust what you read. Check out teamblind.com to get the latest insights and the answers to your workplace questions. When you're building a culture of belonging, every word counts. That's why Textio brings the world's most advanced language insights into your hiring and employer brand content. Our industry-leading approach to artificial intelligence and machine learning provides the tools needed to find more diverse candidates. In short, Textio builds more equitable workspaces, guiding businesses and writing more inclusive job posts. And we're building on that success by bringing even more products to the market for all people who share our belief that language matters. Words have power, and at Textio, we harness that power to increase the access and availability of value-driven work for everyone.
What's going on, Living Corporate? It's Tristan, and I want to thank you for tapping back in with me as I provide some tips and advice for professionals. Today, let's discuss how you can more effectively search for jobs on LinkedIn. When applying online, there are so many factors that play into being seen by employers. LinkedIn has some great filter and sorting options that can help you narrow down your results and even potentially increase your odds of being seen. I'm not going to talk about standard filters like location or company, but some that you may not have even known existed. The first filter is date posted. We know that the sooner you get your application in, the higher the likelihood of the recruiter or hiring manager reviewing it. By default, your job search results will show results from any time, but you can use this filter to only display jobs posted within the last 24 hours, the past week, or the past month. The second filter is under 10 applicants. The average job posting gets anywhere from 150 to 250 applicants, so if you can be one of the first people to get your application in, you're more likely to be considered for the role. The third filter is in your network. We know the best way to land jobs is through networking and referrals. By using this filter, you'll only bring up jobs where you have a connection. You can then reach out to that connection for an informational interview or even a referral depending on your relationship with them. The last four filters I'm going to discuss together because I think they can work well in tandem, and they are experience level, job type, industry, and job function. You can filter your job search by specific levels of experience, job industry, particular skills, or even by full-time, part-time, contract, and more. Suppose you're trying to move into a senior level leadership role, transition into a new industry, or just exploring what options are out there based on the skills or expertise you have. These settings can help you narrow down the possibilities. Lastly, don't forget to set up job alerts. You can create job alerts on LinkedIn to stay updated on new job postings that match your preferences. You can choose to receive these alerts daily or weekly through the email, app, notifications, or both. Start by searching for a job on LinkedIn. At the top left of the job search results page, switch the job alert toggle to on to create a job alert for that search criteria. Instead of spending hours searching for your ideal role, try using some of these filters and sorting options to cut down on your job search time. This tip was brought to you by Tristan of Layfield Resume Consulting. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Layfield Resume, or connect with me, Tristan Layfield, on LinkedIn.
Living Corporate is brought to you by Doximity. Doximity is committed to fostering an inclusive and diverse work environment where differences are valued, practices are equitable, and employees experience a sense of belonging that allows them to bring their full, authentic selves daily. As medicine's largest network, there's an elevated level of responsibility to everything we do. We don't take that responsibility lightly and are committed to working towards a more equitable world inside and beyond our virtual office walls. So if you want to learn more about Doximity, go to your app store and type in DOXIMITY. Again, that's DOXIMITY. This episode of Living Corporate is brought to you by Blind. Blind is a trusted community of more than 5 million verified professionals from startups to some of the largest companies in the world like Amazon, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs, Google, JP Morgan, Meta, and more. Blind's mission of transparency seeks to break down professional barriers and silos at work so that you can make productive change and advance your career. It's a safe space to ask questions and get the real-time insights and perspectives from people who know what you've been through. On Blind, you can connect and have honest discussions about everything from compensation, company culture, performance reviews, promotions, and more. You can also join your exclusive private company channel to chat with your coworkers about company policies and what's really going on at work. And because it's anonymous, you can be honest and trust what you read on Blind. Download and install Blind from the App Store or visit teamblind.com to get access to the latest salary, company reviews, and interview experiences from thousands of companies worldwide. Fred, what's going on, man?
Zach, what's good, baby? How's everything,
Man, life is crazy. We was talking off mic about just how time was moving on last time we connected. You know, we had connected. Well, I think we were already kind of like talking on Twitter a little bit via DM or whatever. But then we really started talking after an event. We won't even get into the details. It was very funny to me. Let me just say that. Like, well, you know what I'm saying? For people who were there, you know what I'm talking about. If not, it's cool. It's not really hyper germane to anything we're talking about today. But what I'm really excited about, man, is to connect about your book, man, Patriarchy Blues. Like, Patriarchy Blues, Reflection on Manhood. It's interesting, like, we talk a lot about these systems, and I recognize that, like, Black men writing on manhood and patriarchy, like conceptually or systematically, is not a foreign thing or a new thing. Like, it would be arrogant to say, you know, this we've never seen this before. However, I believe in this era, like, there aren't a ton of spaces really like unpacking the intersectionality of Black masculinity, patriarchy, masculinity as a concept, especially within like the colonized context. I'd love just to hear more about like what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, I mean, for me, well, first and foremost, you're 1,000% right, and I would never fancy myself to be someone who's like inventing a space, who's the first one have nations, right? Like, I stand on the shoulders of you know the Alice Walkers, on the shoulders of Bell Hooks, on the shoulders of Baldwin, and so on and so forth, right? And just these concepts. But I do think contemporarily we're not having enough of the conversations, and I think we're not only not having them, but even in Bell Hooks' works, you see how Bell Hooks became more intersectional as time went on, right? So we're definitely having conversations from an intersectional vantage point. So, you know, this book came about, quite frankly, a little bit after that moment that you was talking about earlier that people are not necessarily privy to. You know, I was thinking about how we all play a role in upholding and being complicit in these structures, whether we're talking about white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy. And when I thought about patriarchy, I'm like, man, we really don't be talking about this enough. You know, patriarchy is kind of framed through the lens of white feminism oftentimes, right? Like, oh, misogyny, sexism, men are doing this, so on and so forth. I'm like, man, but we really need to also be talking about transphobia, homophobia, toxic masculinity, and the ways in which those affect the Black community as well, very specifically.
Well, it's interesting, like, to that end, I remember there was an article, I think it dropped on The Root years ago, and everybody went super left. The article, I think the title was Black Men Are the White Women of Black People or something like that. Do you remember that article?
White women are Black people, yep.
I remember, like, people were really upset, and I remember, and I mean, I didn't understand enough about it, and at that time I didn't care like hard enough to like give it all the smoke that folks on social media was giving it. But as I continued to just kind of like progress on and learn and grow by the grace of God, is like, what I take away from that, and just that the concept is like, Black men, we participate and benefit from patriarchy. We don't benefit from it in the same degrees or contexts as white men do, and many could argue, I would certainly argue, even as many white women do. But we still do participate and engage and frankly invest in these systems and structures. Like, you know, I know within Patriarchy Blues, you call some things out, and you call some challenge, you challenge and name harms and certain behaviors. Like, talk to me about like your perspective on the black male relationship with patriarchy and why there likely needs to be, I would say, some divestment.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be divestment, you know, because things. So one, we are oftentimes paralleling and projecting what we've internalized for the last 400 years, right? So a lot of Black men are paralleling what they've seen and been taught by white men, quite frankly, right? And it doesn't absolve Black men, but it speaks truth to what's happening, right? Because I think white women do it oftentimes as well. Like, a lot of my critique of white feminism is that white feminism is not interested in equity or equality, is interested in power, which is consistent with what white men are interested in. And I think Black men, cishet Black men specifically, do the same thing a lot of times, right? If you look at somebody, let's say Kevin Samuels, or like other Black men who have historically said things like, oh, we need to build up Black men, we need to build up the Black family, we need to do X, Y, and Z, but completely leave out the harm they are causing, let's say, Black women or the Black trans community or the Black homosexual community, right? How are you going to lift Black people but not lift all Black people, right? It doesn't make sense. You're showing me then your interest is not Black people, your interest is self, right? And I think that we have not had these conversations. I think in this nation, strategically, we as a people, and I don't just mean Black people, I mean we as a people in this nation, in America, have been taught that two things can't be true, and the opposite is completely true, right? Where you can cause harm and also be harmed, right? So as a Black man, yeah, every time I walk out my house, I think that might be the last time I ever see my loved ones again, right? And also, every time certain people come into contact with me, they have to assume the same thing, right? If a Black trans woman comes into contact with a Black cishet man, she might assume this might be my last interaction, or last time I see my people. And two things have to be true for both of those, right? We have to make space for both of those, or else we're not freeing anybody. I talk about that in Patriarchy Blues. It's like, if shackles exist, even if they're not on you, they can be back on you at any moment. So it's not about getting the shackles off, it's about destroying the shackles.
Man, yeah, and it's crazy because, like, I think, so I was reading, I've been getting into bell hooks like the past, like, I'm gonna say like year or so. But in one of her pieces, she was talking about, like, she was really breaking down, like, she was some analysis on really looking at from the time of King to now, and like this push from liberation, or looking at like liberation from a perspective of like self-empowerment and like restructuring policies and systems and structures, to really equivocating power or freedom with financial status or power and materialism and things of that nature. And so, like, it's interesting because, like, I think so many of us, like, we're conditioned, like when we look at some of the most prominent, popular Black male voices, a lot of them are talking about finance, right? You need to invest, like it's the money that's going to get you free, or it's the money that's going to get you a seat at this quote unquote table with these other white folks, which then you'll be seen as white, which then you'll be able to be free. And like, I think like there's so much just to unlearn. I'm curious though, like, like we're in 2022, Gen Z continues to be like this ever-growing group. That group is gonna be taking over the workforce. We're looking at this new political landscape unfurling in front of us. We're seeing late stage capitalism and a bunch of stuff collapse. Like, interesting, like, as I look at just like these systems around us, like you talk about like our political system, you think about like our current economy. I just see instability like all over the place. I see that. I just feel like we're at the end of something, right? I'm not saying the sky is falling per se, or that the world is about to end today, but I also am looking. I'm just like, yo, I just don't. Talk to me about how sustainable do you really think patriarchy is, as we just look at like what's in front of us and what's around us.
Well, I think that none of this is sustainable, right? And I think a lot of people see me as someone who's constantly beating a drum of doom, but we have to have honest conversations. I happen to be someone who pays attention, and when you look at the focus that everyone has right now, it's very narcissistic. Is make your money for yourself, maybe for the people you have proximity to, like your immediate family, and nothing else matters, right? And that's the last step. That's the last step and end game of capitalism, right? It's to make people so narcissistic that they destroy everything around them without a care in the world, right? What can all that money be spent on when our cities are flooded? What can all that money be spent on when, like, it's not about, like, you talk about, like, I'll give you an example. So I grew up in the projects, right? And I have worked to my bone. I mean, like, to my absolute bone, to make something of myself and to get to a point where I can consider like buying a house and stuff like that. And I do well for myself, but still not well enough in 2022 to buy the house that I could have bought in 2017, right? Had I had the money then, right? And it's not because, for some reason it's some weird algorithm that has increased home prices. No, it's because there are a small group of major capitalists who are hoarding wealth and leaning as hard as possible into the things that we're talking about and making it impossible for everybody else. So what does it matter that I've kept all this, I've saved all this money and third? I can't buy a home, right? I can't buy a
Right.
home. I can't do certain things, and I'm on the more privileged side of things. So again, not a single part of this is sustainable. People have bought into, in my opinion, the end game of white supremacy, and that is, the worst parts of capitalism, patriarchy, ableism, everything you could think of.
When we talk about like just your own journey, because you talk a little bit about it in Patriarchy Blues around just like your own learnings and experience, like what was like the biggest wake up call for you around like, look, I need to, I, Frederick Joseph, Fred Joseph, I need to reinterrogate my position, my investment, my participation in the patriarchy as I experience it in America.
I think it was three things. So in Patriarchy Blues, I talk about the part of it that was tied to my diagnosis with having multiple sclerosis, right? I think that any person who has any decency in them, when you are reminded of your mortality, it starts making you question who you've been, right? Not just who you've been, but who you've been in comparison to who you want to be and how you want to be remembered. Multiple sclerosis was something that I got diagnosed with at 24. And I had to investigate, right? I had to interrogate how I stood in the world in case I'm not here, right? And I realized, I was like, because I think people always assume, especially young people, that they're omnipotent, right? Like a lot of young people assume that, and I got a wake up call very early. So I started doing the work to kind of be like, look, I don't have forever, but I can build something that lasts way beyond me. And I try to do that, whether it's in a book or a campaign to help people, or even a Twitter post, right? It could be something as simple as that. So I think that's one part of it. And then the other parts, I think, one, as horrible as social media is, it has given me the chance to connect with people from all over walks of life, perspectives, so on and so forth. People like yourself, where it's just like, I'm reaffirmed on certain things and challenged on certain things. Like, I'll see you post something. I'm like, the brother's right there, right? And I'll just be like, let me think about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And I'm considering. But social media also gave me an opportunity to be in space with people, and particularly the Black trans community and trans women very specifically. And seeing how trans women, who are the most oppressed group in our world, right? Black trans women specifically, like how they had to both strive to find their happiness and joy and healing in a world where everything is set against them because they're facing the intersectional oppression of transphobia, patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism. And to watch them and the radical love and courage that they have absolutely changed me.
To that end, like what does practical, and I'm not going to use the word allyship because I feel again it's been hijacked and bastardized and frankly run into the ground a bit. What are ways that cishet Black men can better support, uplift, and protect Black trans women from your perspective as a cishet man, um, who is deep in this space and on your own journey?
I think honestly, we have to parallel some of the things that we've been preaching in anti-racism, right? Like actually holding ourselves and others accountable would be number one. Like that's one thing. One thing I'll say in my friend groups is I don't stand for transphobia, right? I don't stand for homophobia. And when I say I don't stand for those things, it is if you make a mistake, I will try to help you along the way of how I had to be helped and learned on my own. But when you're trying to create harm, that is my cutoff. I'm not going to let you harm this community purposefully, right? And also, I have to make sure that I'm interrogating the ways I exist, I benefit from, and I cause harm every single day, right? I think a lot of people, when they want to be quote unquote allies, this is one of the problems with allyship. Allyship is something that people say to check a box, right? Like, oh, I bought a book about Marsha P. Johnson, so I'm an ally to the trans community. Says who? Says who? What do you do? This ain't no. You're not gonna undo hundreds and thousands of years of oppression by buying no book, watching no documentary. So I think the first step for cishet Black men is how are you creating space in your life on a consistent and regular basis to do the work. Right. And the work looks like different things. It looks like donations to organizations. It looks like protests. It looks like holding people accountable, holding yourself accountable. It looks like actually leaning into love, empathy, and friendship, quite frankly, for the community. Like actually being around these people and be like, I got you. Right. Like I saw one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen was a few months back. There was a Black trans woman who was walking in the West Village, and somebody had said something to her. I wasn't close enough to hear what they had said, but it was something horribly transphobic, I'm sure. And I saw the Black trans woman. She started arguing with this guy who's with his friends. So I'm walking over there, and I'm ready to say something. I mean, not to be problematic, but I'm ready for war. You know what I mean? Like I stand by this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm like I said, I'm from I'm from Yonkers. I don't play that. So like, but as I'm on my way over there, two other Black men came over to have this Black trans woman's back,
That's
right?
dope. Yeah, that's dope.
And I'm like, oh, okay, there's hope because we have collectively, not even knowing each other in our own individual spaces, decided this doesn't happen around me. And I think that's what it has to be. This doesn't happen around me.
Since we're here again, like we're two cishet Black men in talking about other spaces, I want to give you a little bit of space to talk to me about why white feminism is so trash. Like, talk to me about like, like I've had these conversations. Actually, you shared a story, so I'm gonna give you a story back. You actually supported my Kickstarter like a couple years ago. Like you promoted it, and then you gave to it as well. I can give you some updates offline about that actually, because we're about to launch something really dope next week. But anyway, or whenever this airs, it'll probably be launched by then. But anyway, point is, I remember that like, donation, like not donate, contributions to the Kickstarter were coming in, right, Fred? Like they was pouring in, like we crashed the goal. And then I got a comment later, like maybe towards like right when the campaign was about to end. Someone said, I heard you. I listened to. I supported this because I like the premise and your mission, but I went back and listened to some of your podcasts, and you talked about how white feminism is white supremacy, and because you said that, I'm no longer going to donate to your Kickstarter. Like I'm not going to support this. I was ready. She's like, I was ready to. She said I was ready to like give you like a sponsorship and like help you and like connect you with people in my corporate network. But since I found that you said that, I'm now going to not only retract that, but I'm also going to retract my this financial commitment that I made to your Kickstarter. Like, talk to me about like, you've written about white feminism. Unpack it a little bit for folks who are listening, just in terms of why it's problematic, why it's oppressive, and what really what needs to happen with that space.
Whew. Well, first of all, I'm gonna say I'm sorry that you dealt with that, brother. I think that any of us who have been in any public-facing work in progressive spaces have dealt with the ire of white feminism in some capacity. So white feminism, people have to first and foremost realize that white women are white, right? Like, there's this leaning into like, I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I'm a woman. Absolutely. And you are also white. And in our constructs, our social constructs, our political constructs, our financial constructs, so on and so forth, whiteness is king. And only second to that white king is the white queen, right? There are
Mhm.
hierarchies to these things of who has power, who has privilege. Like I think back to a situation similar to I think about the situations, right? Let's look at matter of fact, great one. Let's look at Emmett Till, right?
Mhm.
While Emmett Till was not physically murdered by a white woman, Emmett Till was murdered by white men. Those white men were acting on the emotions and as the foot soldiers of white women, or a white woman rather, and specifically her tears, right? Like white women, while they don't have all the power in these constructs, they have oftentimes the second most power.
Mhm.
But through white feminism, and because they are women, and because the patriarchy does exist, and because they are oppressed in their own ways, they have taken that womanhood and used it as not just a way to veil their own oppressive nature, but to shield themselves from it, right? To shield themselves from any accountability for anything. And again, we talked about it earlier with black men, right? You are oppressed, but you can also be someone's oppressor. White women are the same by far. And I feel like the danger of white women specifically is their proximity to white men. Because oftentimes, white feminism, unlike intersectional feminism, unlike womanism, white feminism is not interested in equity or equality. It's interested in power because it parallels what it has seen men do, right? So it's not a matter of white want to level the playing field. Is white us, and that we want to take the place at the top of the totem pole, right? And that's a
Mhm.
dangerous thing because what you're doing is you're taking and internalizing everything that white men have been, and what you're trying to do is be the new white men, right? Like you're not you're
Right.
not actually trying to create progress. You're just trying to take up the same space, right? You're trying to change. You're trying to shift the power towards you, and the people who are harmed most by that are black and brown communities, right? Because it doesn't allow people to come along with you. Again, unlike intersectional feminism, where intersectional feminists are looking at how to create equity and equality for basically everyone, right? Like, oh, in these intersections, we're looking at toxic masculinity, we're looking at transphobia, we're looking at homophobia. That is not what white feminism is interested in. And I think you can see it, especially with the conversations around bodily autonomy following the Roe v. Wade leak, where a lot of white feminists are angry that people are using terms like birthing people, right? Because the reality of it is, if a person is a trans man, they oftentimes have reproductive organs, right? Unless they have had transitional surgery to change that. But they oftentimes can still have reproductive organs, meaning that that is a man who can give birth, meaning that not only women can give birth, but because that is an inclusive narrative, that is an inclusive conversation that draws upon more than just the victimization of white women specifically. They're not interested in that conversation. They're actually opposed to that conversation, very similar to how white men are opposed to any conversation about progress of anybody else but themselves.
Ooh. That's why you be selling them books, dog. For real. You talking that talk on here. Fred, look, man, it's always a pleasure. You know you're a friend of the show. You're welcome back anytime. The book is called Patriarchy Blues. Phenomenal read, empowering, challenging read, but empowering at the same time. And man, I just want to thank you again. Look, man, it can't let this, like we talked off mic. Last time we spoke, I think my baby was like, a couple months old, man. Let's not let it be
just
too long until we
just
talk
born,
again. Yeah,
just born.
man.
we're not doing that again. Because I think now more than ever, especially people who find healing and soft places to land in these days, got to be in those places more often. Like, just we be too on the same page not to connect more. So I hold myself accountable. So as soon as we jump off of here, I don't even know if you have my number. Like, we need to be texting on a regular basis and just kicking it. So I'm gonna message you like literally in the next 2 minutes.
I got you, dog. I appreciate you, man. Let's talk soon.
Absolutely, bro. Love to y'all over there.
Hey, man, love to you too. Peace.
Later.
And we're back. Yo, shout out Fred Joseph. Shout out to the family. Man, thank you so much for all the work you're doing. Shout out to Patriarchy Blues. If you haven't copped, reserved, ordered, make sure you click the link in the show notes. Get to that. It's a phenomenal read, challenging, transparent, honest, accessible. And I would just challenge, if you're a black person or a brown person, black or brown man listening to this, I want you to challenge yourself and ask yourself, what are ways that you can divest from the patriarchy to be a better advocate and ally to women, particularly black and brown women? What does it look like for you to leverage your relative privilege and power to be a sponsor, to be a champion, to be a voice, to be an advocate, even if that means you not being even if that means you not being in the foreground. Like, how can you do that without having to hog up the spotlight, right? Like, that's the question I leave for y'all. And I'm gonna tell y'all, go ahead and give Apple Podcasts a visit. Go Living Corporate, give us 5 stars in the review. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you check out our merch. Make sure you check out the website. It's super fire. Create your profile, select the topics you're interested in. You'll get a curated experience, recommendations of content based on our library of over 1,500 pieces of digital media. 1,500 and growing. Shoot, by the time this thing, maybe it's like 1,800 at this point. I don't know, but it's growing. We'll talk to y'all soon, all right? Till next time. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.
Living Corporate is brought to you by Textio. Today's top talent is everywhere, representing everyone. And our work environment should reflect the level of inclusion to meet that standard. Textio achieves this in building more equitable company cultures through the language we use in our job postings. That culture is formed one hire at a time, making the words we use to reach more diverse candidates all the more important. Our advanced language insights and employer brand content is what drives our mission of inclusion. Through our industry-leading application of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're able to widen companies' reach in finding and building upon the very diverse talent that empowers a culture of belonging. Every door should be open to every qualified job seeker. Again, that's Textio.